writer-director, Andie Jing Ai Ng. And stars Brandon Suhu and thank you so much for coming and joining us here for the opening night of the Boston Asian American Film Festival. First off, how are you guys enjoying Boston so far?
It's very cold.
Yeah, that too.
It's not cold here. But we love it.
Have you guys been here before? Do you have any history with Boston, or is it your first time?
I actually went to school here for a year. I went to Boston University. So I went to BU for a year, and I actually walked around on the campus today. It was very surreal.
First time here.
I've been here a bunch actually. My sister went to Harvard, my older sister, so we came to visit her a bunch, and it's been pretty the whole time. So.
Yeah. So let's dive into it, shall we? When our screening committee first watched this film months ago, we were all really struck by the central idea you created around art forgery and how much it ties into the Asian American experience. The same way that Coco and Raymond aim to forge these classical white American artists as closely as possible, many of us in the Asian American diaspora have to be forced to assimilate to white culture in order to fit in. It's a film about performative identities. Pretty much every character in the film performs some type of front of some kind to the world. But at the same time, it's also weirdly empowering, the way that these characters weaponize that stereotype of the model minority to avoid suspicion and get away with things they might not be able to get away with. So I guess my first question for you three is kind of, what does the idea of the model minority mean to you?
Well, yeah, I guess I wrote this film thinking about the model minority. I definitely felt for a lot of my life to be like the fuck up in my family. And so I was constantly chasing this idea of being more perfect than I ever felt I was. And in that moment, like I think comes like great confusion, especially when you're like growing up. So that's kind of where I came from, is that like I wanted to see these characters as people and also deal with my own feelings about always chasing something that was false.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, especially in the creative fields, if you're in acting or another form of like media, I think we can all relate that our parents probably didn't want or expect us to do anything in the arts. So model minority is definitely an expectation that has loomed above us for a large majority of our lives. So yeah, I agree that this is like a really cool movie to kind of break out of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, growing up as an Asian American, definitely have dealt with my own feelings about the model minority myth, and I think Jing did such a great job with being able to create these characters that are dealing with it in their own ways. And also, I think it was really cool to see people like Holden and Talia, who, you know, are dealing with their own version of their face and what they need to project forward out into the world and how people perceive them, and making sure that there's like a certain level of a front. So I liked how Jing dealt with the model minority myth, but also kind of expanded it to everybody is dealing with their own version of trying to maintain this image of themselves.
Yeah, so kind of going back to the beginning, what made you want to write this project? What made you want to explore the world of art forgery?
So I'm a big fan of crime movies, and the thing about working in the film industry and coming up as like an Asian female director is you get told that you can't direct a crime movie. The other thing that struck me about art forgery in particular is there was a huge art forgery scandal in New York. A few years ago, about $80 million worth of forged art. And the guy behind all of it was a Chinese art forger. No one talks about it. He's never been interviewed. Most people don't even know his name. He fled before he ever got questioned. And isn't that the shame that like no one knows about it? I wanted to write like my version of the story. So that was kind of my angle, and it's not completely false.
Yeah, so kind of what made you want to set the film in Miami? Miami isn't a community we traditionally think of as having a lot of Asian American people. Why tell the story in that setting?
Well, I'm Asian and I grew up in Miami. And so like maybe I'm in the minority there. I grew up between Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and Miami. And people are like, what do you mean by that? I mean 6 months in both places for the whole of my life. So really weird background, tropical places on different ends of the globe. But America, Miami was my entry point. It was my version of American culture that I knew for so long. And like you said, not a lot of Asians in Miami, at 2%. Tropical Chinese is one of the oldest Chinese restaurants in Miami, and I wrote it into the script thinking that we would have to find a different Chinese restaurant, but the community is so small that my brother's friend knew the owner and gave him the script. And instead of finding it offensive that I had made his family art forgers, he thought it was hilarious. Yeah. And so we ended up filming there. It's a real restaurant. It's been open since 1982.
Yeah, so Andie and Brandon, as kind of outsiders from LA, what was it like seeing Miami through Jing's eyes?
I gotta say, I felt like Jing was the mayor of Miami. Like, it felt like I was just like in the best hands. Like, it just really, I'm really glad I got to experience Miami in this way, because obviously she's grown up there and lived there, so she knew where to take us and knew where all the good spots were to eat, and I really felt held and safe.
Yeah, Jing did an amazing job hosting us in her city. I don't think my experience in Miami wouldn't have been nearly as awesome and enjoyable if you weren't showing us around. I feel like you had like plugs in every place we went to.
10 out of 10 would recommend.
You know, all the good food spots. So yeah, Jing's Miami is the best Miami.
Yeah, so kind of now that you've created this script, how did you cast these roles? What about Andie and Brandon made you say, this is Coco and Raymond?
Yeah, so we worked with the casting director, Damien Bao. I first saw his work.
Yeah, shout out Damien Bao.
He and I worked together for the first time on Forge.
Mm-hmm.
I knew his work because he had cast a lot of other Asian American films, and I noted that they were always really authentic. And the funny part about Forge is it was a completely open casting call. So we didn't have a single cast member attached when we knew we were going into production. So Andie and Brandon are the result of this open casting call. They were Raymond and Coco, and it was like multiple rounds of callbacks. You know, it wasn't an easy choice. When Hollywood says that they cannot cast Asian Americans, you're lying, because there's so much talent out there. We got thousands of tapes, and it was just really refreshing to see. As a director, I really believe in discovery talent. So even like Kelly's role was an open casting call, and everyone found us.
Yeah, and for the two of you, kind of what appealed to you about the project when you're thinking about applying, other than, you know, a job?
Well, I mean, just right out the gate, the script was so good, and just reading it, it was just this new story, and it was these characters that were Asian American and that were told in an authentic and real way, and were interesting, and were real people making choices where, you know, you might not agree with the choices that they were making, but the family dynamic and everything about it was just so well done. And I was really happy, and I felt very grateful to have been able to work on this project. Yeah.
Honestly, same. I read the sides, I saw the materials for it, and I mean, the story was just such an unorthodox story about Asian Americans. Such flawed characters, but also such a sweet story at the same time. And yeah, I saw a post for it on Instagram. Someone like sent it to me, and I self-submitted, and I was really stoked about even like reading the breakdown for it. So, like you said, super honored just to have been a part of this project.
Yeah, and one of the great things about this film is the chemistry between the two of you. Was that something that came easily, or was it something you had to really work on in rehearsal and whatnot?
So hard.
Yeah, absolute nightmare. Terrible.
Yeah.
No, honestly, like when we did our like third round or second round of callbacks, and we had our reading in the room, We got into chemistry reads with the other candidates, and definitely when I read with Andie, I was like, that's my sister.
That's my brother. It was instantaneous. Like, just as soon as we landed, like, I felt the same way in the callback, and then as soon as we landed and we started talking and hanging out, it just really fell into that dynamic really easily, and it felt truly like when I was on set that I was with my older brother, that he was, you know, kind of like taking care of me and making sure that I was okay, and I'm really grateful to have been.
Yeah. Did you have to learn how to paint to play the role?
So I definitely took some art classes prior to getting to Miami because I wanted to understand, like, you know, how it is, all the different things of like how to hold a paintbrush, like what looks authentic, and I wish I could paint better than I do currently, but I definitely did take some art classes to prepare for this role.
And Brandon, did you learn how to forge documents for this project?
Honestly, like, I had to practice that a bunch because the characters whose signature that I was forging is right-handed, and I'm left-handed, so when you're right-handed, you write at a slant like this naturally, so I was trying to write at that slant like that, so I had like a T-Rex hand trying to write the signature, so it took me like a few takes to make that look not crazy. But yeah, it's really fun.
I will say for Jing, how accurate would you say the forgery is depicted in the film? Like, could I do this? Could they?
There is a book called The Art Forger's Handbook. Art forgers inhabit this weird space in like crime where a lot of people are huge fans of art forgers, and so when they come out of jail and you're discovered, they end up having these fan bases that they speak to directly. And so there's a book that is literally a manual on how to like forge art. We used a lot of it, obviously made it a bit more snazzy for the camera, but yeah, you can forge a painting. It's not hard actually. That's not me encouraging anyone.
Are there any FBI agents in the audience? No, we good? It was interesting learning there is an FBI arts crime division. That wasn't something I learned until I watched the film.
Cool.
Anyway, yeah, let's kind of dive into talking about the characters. You know, speaking of forgers, we of course have at the center of this Coco, played by Andie, who, you know, is very quiet, very detail-oriented, but is kind of secretly this overachiever. She is striving to kind of get the visibility of the artist she wants to imitate, you know. Andie, you may have seen in such successful films as, or TV shows as BAAFF, you know. We got any BAAFF fans in the audience? And also Greatest Hits, which is a fantastic little indie film you can watch on Hulu. But you're someone who's really emerging as an artist, you know. Did you kind of relate to Coco in that way?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I read the script, I immediately felt like I understood Coco, and I just feel like Coco really, and actually I felt like I grew as a person through shooting and trying to understand Coco and her like tenacity and her bravado and also her belief in herself, and knowing that she is good enough and that she knows it, and that she doesn't need someone to tell her that she's good. She already knows that she is, and I really thought it was really badass of her to be like, no, I know this, and I'm gonna put this out there. And I really felt like her courage was something that like still kind of inspires me to this day, because I feel like I face a lot of imposter syndrome, and so to play someone who didn't really have that, it was actually a little difficult for me.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a great performance on screen. And talking about kind of Brandon's character too, who's fronting in a very different way, someone who is kind of creating, you know, in the way that they're imitating for white society, your character is kind of imitating for your Asian family, trying to seem more successful. You know, something I honestly think a lot of us are able to relate to with Asian parents. Yeah, what was it like kind of playing someone like that who is, you know, pretending to be confident but kind of doesn't quite know their role in society, you know, working as a towel boy?
Honestly, I like you were saying, it's a very relatable kind of archetype. Pretty familiar. I think like a younger version of myself definitely was in that same kind of headspace, like you were saying, a lot of fronting and a lot of like putting on for my family and for whatever social circles I wanted to be a part of. And it didn't have to be that hard to kind of reach back to remember what that feels like. So, yeah, totally a relatable character for sure.
Yeah, and Brandon, if you don't know, is someone who has been on the silver screen since you were a child. You may not recognize him, but he was the little kid drug dealer in Tropic Thunder about 17 years ago. So, you know, this isn't your first foray into the portrayal of crime, but what's it kind of been like?
I'm getting typecasted, I think.
What's it been like kind of watching yourself grow up in the film industry and on screen, and kind of how is this project maybe a little bit different for you?
I mean, it's been super crazy. I don't think starting off in the entertainment industry at a really young age is a really orthodox way to grow up. And I didn't really realize that when I was shooting Tropic Thunder. So, I mean, I was barely a person. I was shooting that when I was 10, and that's like subhuman levels. So, yeah, I think as I grew up, I just started to really appreciate what it really was that I did, and started to appreciate the project even more. I'll like revisit the movie now, and I'm actually like, I get the jokes that I didn't get when I was saying them. But yeah, I think I just grew into like really appreciating what an opportunity it was, the people that I was surrounded by and continue to be surrounded by. And yeah, just really seeing the humor of it at a deeper level.
Yeah, fantastic. And just to kind of shout out some of the other actors who were in the film, you know, everyone, like I said, is representing kind of a different kind of fronting. You know, Edmund is someone who comes from inherited wealth and is kind of pretending to maintain this scam that definitely reminds us of Fire Festival a little bit, you know. And kind of Emily is someone who, like she says in the film, comes from a background of biology but has found this career pivot into the world of FBI art crimes, and also kind of in a similar way exists as an outsider to both Miami and the FBI, but in the same way that like great detectives can kind of see the details that no one else can see. As you were writing the project and working with actors, kind of what was it like working with Edmund Donovan and Kelly Marie Tran and any other of the amazing cast you had?
They were all amazing. We got super lucky casting this project. Like I said, we didn't have a single cast member attached. This was something that I wanted to make, and we weren't sure where we were going with the cast. A story that is really good to tell is actually T.R. Knight, who plays the art dealer in the movie. He was the first person to come onto the cast. During the open casting call, he found the script because someone approached him and said, "You should be Holden." He read it, and he was like, "I'm far too old to play Holden." But he wanted to be part of the movie so bad that he pitched himself to me as Sandy Baker, who originally was like nothing like the character is now. And he made me feel like Christopher Nolan, because he was so enthusiastic about my script that I actually started believing myself a bit more. And that's, you know, my experience working with this cast has been so positive because they are all so supportive. This is my first feature. It wasn't a big budget. Everyone worked for scale. So their faith in me was remarkable, and I learned so much from working with each of them.
Yeah, as we're kind of starting to wrap up, I do want to ask you about the ending and how you maybe interpret it, you know, all of you. Obviously we see Coco kind of escape, but ultimately get the television recognition that she's been looking for the entire film, albeit in a police news report. So what do you think happens next? You know, does Coco get away? Does she give herself into the cops? You know, it's up for interpretation, but what's your interpretation?
I'm gonna throw the question back at you, Nate. What do you think happens?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it earlier, but honestly, the way that Coco wanted to be seen, there's something in the back of my head that's like, now that she has that feeling, I can't imagine her letting it go. So whether she gets roped up in other art or even like hands herself into the police so that she can be recognized, I feel like once that germ is kind of inside, it's hard for that not to grow. But that's my interpretation, so.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite art forgers is Ripley. So when I was writing this, I took inspiration
The
from
Patricia
that.
Highsmith books?
Yeah, exactly. The book series, also the, you know, talented Mr. Ripley. He's originally an art forger. I think a good art forger kind of gets away for a while. A lot of the people I researched have been doing it for 40 plus years. I think it's just like a profession that keeps going until you're caught. And I guess in Coco's case, she's caught, but who knows where she goes.
And Brandon, what do you think happens to Raymond? You think he just lives in prison? You think he gets out, runs other schemes, digs his tunnel out Shawshank style? What do you think?
He just picks up like a really cool prison hustle.
He's the mayor of the prison.
I become the resident tattoo artist in jail.
So yeah, that's about the time that we have.
Thank you so much for that conversation. Just another deep appreciation to Jing for coming, for bringing your wonderful creative vision to us. It really was such a treat to be able to open the festival with this. The idea of really, art at the center of one's universe and what it really means to, that's what, just really felt like it was the right film to be opening the festival